Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is another episode of The Last Word on Rugby. Thanks for joining us. If you haven't yet, click on that like, the subscribe button, follow us. We bring you the latest in South African rugby on a weekly basis. And we're going to jump into it this morning with Mike Greenaway. It's been a very, very good first camp of the Springboks in Cape Town this past week. Mike, you've been at it with a box. Just from what came from those camps from Rassie's voice, what do you make of the first camp, the initial camp, and what the plans are that the Boks have in store for them this season?
Yeah, from the sounds of it, it was extremely productive and constructive. A couple of things stood out for me is the role of Felix Jones coming back. He seems like he's going to be a kind of a roving coach,
Yeah.
the coach that helps the coaches. So he's not specifically nailed down to one portfolio, if you like. He's going to be working with each individual coach who is a specific coach, like the defense coach, the attack coach, even the conditioning coach. He's just going to sort of add value to each of the established positions. And I think that's fantastic. So it really is going to, so the guys aren't coaches can be pigeonholed in their specific areas of expertise, but sort of Felix moving around, you'll, and then reporting to Rassie, of course, I think there'll be more fluidity in how they operate from a coaching point of view. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, because the other thing that really stood out for me was Rassie's attitude towards the older players. But do you want to add anything to Felix?
Yeah. Look, that towards the older players, that's a great topic. But to add to that, it's been lekker chatting to Rassie on just how that coaching system will work, and he gave us quite a nice explaining on how their work week goes about. On a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they would dissect and analyze the games that whether it's URC or Six Nations, and then as the week goes on a Tuesday, they would have coaches presenting certain things, what they want from the players, and then every Thursday, if I recall the chat with him correctly, they would have a coach present his plans, and they would tear into those plans. And I think with Felix slotting in, helping every department, I think how they do things, they can just become stronger. And that was a pretty nice insight that Rassie gave in terms of how they go about things, but also how Felix will strengthen each department and not be set on getting back into the role that he fulfilled previously.
Yeah, and every single thing that the players on his radar do is monitored, analyzed, noted. And in fact, that's how he arrived at his 82 or 3 players he's thrown that net far and wide, and the net has gathered the guys who are performing in matches. So it's call Rassie Big Brother. He's watching.
He watches everything.
There's no place to hide for. You can't cruise or coast, because if you want to play for the Springboks, that is. And I think that's good. There's accountability. Guys can't coast or cruise. And maybe just on that, that kind of pertains even more to the older players in the squad. I thought that was quite interesting. He's saying to these guys, look, if the stats show us that you are still performing at the highest level, as you did in the last few years, that made you the number one in your position. If you are still performing at that level, I'll pick you. So he's kind of thrown the challenge down to them, saying, I'm not discarding you, I'll pick you, but you've got to be good enough. And if you're not, basically, there's a there's a whole pack of young pups snapping at your heels.
Yeah,
Uh, so yeah, the guys know where they stand. If they train hard, perform, they'll still be picked. And Rassie said, "Age ain't nothing but a number. I'll take you to the World Cup if you're still
yeah,
number one in your position." So that's nice for them to have that reassurance. And it was quite. I wonder if like Sear, what a captain for South Africa, and how important is he is just on and off the field. And
yeah,
you know, he knows he's got to perform, and he can then captain the Springboks perhaps in Australia. And I wonder if that was the rocket he needed to really perform for the Sharks in that URC match in Durban. I mean, he was like a man possessed. He really performed. He scored 2 tries. He was inspirational. He kept calm heads when that was a very difficult game, that in that blistering heat in Durban. So yeah, look, I think that's great. You won't be discarded if you play well.
yeah, and that's also, I feel, the good thing that Rassie's been doing with his players. Ever since he took over, there were a lot of older guys. A name I can mention, Francois Lowe. There was a beast there in the side who played ahead of Kitshoff, who was rummaging his way to the top. But Rassie knew what he was doing. He and his coaches, they
Mm,
knew what they were doing. They didn't come in and came in with a brush and just swept the floor clean and threw out all the older guys that a lot of us thought couldn't make the 2019 World Cup,
yeah,
and they were actually the crucial guys in
yeah,
winning that tournament. And we can go on in 23. The same thing happened, and now we're facing 2027.
yeah,
So it's going to be cool to see who lost, because they are still playing some very good
mm,
rugby. You mentioned Sia now,
yeah,
Dion Fourie at the Stormers. It's interesting to see and to kind of hear how Rassie seeing the picture all fitting
yes.
together.
Yeah, so prior to Rassie, the sort of history of South Africa in World Cup cycles was, as a World Cup ended, there was like a kind of a scorched
Yeah,
earth policy, a
yes,
new coach,
indeed.
new assistant coaches, and they wiped out the core of the previous
Yeah,
coaches' plans. And it was start from scratch, and the Boks were not
exactly.
good, usually in first 2 years after World Cups, and then kind of got competitive closer to the World Cup. And Rassie's not, he's saying no ways. There will be continuity. Of course, there's
Mm.
going to be changes. Some guys will just filter out naturally.
Yeah,
I mean,
they will.
unfortunately, we've seen poor Stephen Kitsoff, those kind of things. And I don't think he's going to be the last. There's going to be maybe a couple more guys who either get injured or, Father Time
To the
just,
end.
you know,
Yeah,
he,
catches
tax
up,
he
eh?
taxes everyone viciously. Yeah. So, no, so it's good to know that Rusty's keeping the guys. And so the Springboks are actually going to be really good for almost the first time between World Cups, and not
Between, yeah,
just at World Cups.
at the World Cup. Yeah,
And Rassie said, our position in the world rankings is important to us. We want to stay up there at number one. We don't want to drop down between World Cups and then shoot up again when we win a World Cup or do well in one. We want to
yeah,
stay at the top consistently, and he can do that by not dropping, like big swathes of players in one go, and then blooding youngsters
yeah.
just en masse.
Yeah, and it's gonna be important to stay amongst the what 1, 2, 3, or other four to top one of the pools when they do the World Cup draw at the end of the year. I think mentioned that the draw is
Mm,
changing, the pools are growing, and they want to be ranked one in one of the pools. So it's not just about playing any guy this year. They want to play and win while they are filtering in new
yeah.
players. And you could hear from the talk that it is a plan to bring in new blood, but there will be older guys. The Dion Fourie mentioned that will sort of shape maybe a a loose trio with young guys, and then amongst the front rankers as well. So that's good to see how certain things are unfolding.
Yeah, I think Rassie's had enough of pools of death, you know.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
that,
I
that,
can
that
say
last
South
World
Africa
Cup,
has had enough.
yes. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, our hearts, our cardio systems can't take that
Yeah,
strain anymore. Yeah, so I mean, like if you think back to that World Cup, the pools that had, I mean, the second half of the draw, um, the two pools on that side had a
mm,
cruise. I mean, England
yeah. It was
started
just
the
a
World
cruise.
Cup very shaky, but they had like four easy games. And so by the
Yeah,
time they got to the semi-final against the Box, they'd had like these warm-ups and built up steadily. Whereas the
mm.
Box on the other side of the draw were fighting for their lives and even
Knockout,
lost a
knockout.
game to Ireland.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, to stay on top of the rankings, to get the number one ranking in an easy-ish pool. I mean, you're always going to have
favorable.
a second team that is going to, you know, is also up there, and then you're going to have a couple of minnows. But all in all, I'm just very positive about the Springboks. It looks
Mm.
like Rassie has taken, I mean, and how can this even be possible? Has taken his planning to another level. I mean,
Another level, yeah.
he just really is. Just getting all his ducks in a row and adding these extra test matches on. I mean, I think this is his big year. This is his big year
Mm.
of planning in terms of getting depth, growing depth in positions. Because he started already, but I mean, on asking for more tests in a Barbarians game. So what we're looking at, 15
Uh,
matches. I don't know when they last played that many games, but he's doing it.
mm.
He knows this year is going to be a big sweat.
Yeah,
And there's going to be a few, maybe you know, might lose the odd game because they're trying things, but this is the year to really uh, get everything organized for
yeah,
2027. You can't do it the year before.
yeah. You can't do
Um,
it in 2026. Yeah,
so that's why he's asked for those extra test matches. And I think there's two that we still don't know who the opponents are. Am I right? Or is
yeah,
it
yeah,
one? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, But and I think those will be prior to the opening games, prior to Georgia, yeah, and Italy, yeah, prior to Italy. I
yeah.
mean, so so by the end of this year, I mean, jeepers, we're now in March. It all starts in June. By the end of November, wow, how much rugby is going to have gone under the bridge? How many players will have started? Some will have taken the opportunity. Some will have played their way out of contention. There
Yeah,
will
yeah,
have
that
been
too.
some calamitous. Who knows where we're going to stand? But Rassie will be a heck of a lot wiser. And, you know,
Mm.
as we said, there's 82 players that are in these camps, either went physically or virtually or however you want to do it. I think he's got three different different kinds of camps. And
Yeah,
but by the end of this year, as he goes into December, there'll be ticks against some of those names and crosses against some, and
yeah.
yeah, he'll be then ready to go into the year before the World Cup with a much clearer mind about who is his one, two, three,
Who's
four, five in every single position,
yeah.
and then 2026, he can really hone his squad and get completely organized. And remember,
Mm.
we've also got next year the All Blacks coming
Yeah,
for
that's gonna
test
be the
series.
epic one.
Yeah. So this is the year
Uh,
he experiments, he gets his depth going, he runs the rule over those 80, and then he knows where he stands for the big preparatory year
for the
next year.
big one, yeah. And that's the good thing. He's using some of the youngsters now, where they might play a test now and only again in 2028. He will know what they have in them.
Yeah,
If they've been to the camp, he knows exactly what they can do. There will be a roadmap
yeah,
of them over the next couple of seasons, whether it's in the
yes.
URC or overseas, and everything is not just being done for 2027 World Cup, but also looking beyond that. As we mentioned, this
Yeah.
succession planning is
Yeah. So
at
what he
the
wants to
top there.
do, so you'll take, I think it's always 33 players that you take to a World Cup. By the time he gets uh, to that stage, um, the more inexperienced guys in the squad, he'll want them to have at least 10 to 15 caps. So that, and
Mm.
that will be his least experienced guys going. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously you can have guys with approaching 100, some way over. Well, Evan and a couple more. There are so there'll be heavily experienced guys, but the most inexperienced guys will have at least he wants caps in double figures.
yeah.
So,
Double
and that'll
figures.
be
That's the
so,
thing.
so that because injuries, sometimes they happen in batches and in a specific position. So
Mm.
he will want his third choice in a specific position to actually be pretty experienced at test
Yeah,
level and have played big
exactly.
tests in big arenas. So yeah, that's what this year is about, is really getting those players, putting them through the ringer, finding out who handles the heat and
Mm.
who doesn't.
Yeah, just quickly, lastly on the box subject, three guys that I would definitely like to see performing over the next couple of weeks as they return to the URC. I mean, someone like Henko van Wyk, we know that that number 13 spot in the Bochum team is sometimes a much discussed one, but
Yeah,
certainly Jesse Kriel, Lucanio Am is still the
yeah.
incumbent there. But then we want to see a third guy stepping up and wanting to
Mm,
make that position his own. The same with
yeah.
that eighth man jersey, number 8 jersey, Cameron
Yeah.
Anakum. We would love to see more of him, less
Mm,
injury and more of him in the URC. He's been
yeah.
absolutely great when it comes to the Bulls. And then thirdly, down here in Cape Town, a versatile player like Suleiman Artenberg, who's had a taste
Yep.
of the Bok camp before. He's gone now again. And he can don the wing jersey and then shift into 13. And Rassie's always looking for
Yeah.
that versatile player. So that's three players on my side. I don't know for you who you'd like to see kick on.
Now I'd like to elaborate on what you said about 13 because it is the one area where the box can have issues.
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
They have players stacking up in almost every other position.
Every
But
position. Yeah.
13 has been problematic, and Lucanio uh, is unfortunately is becoming quite injury prone.
Hmm.
He's not he's torn a hamstring, so he's going to be out for quite some time, and
Yeah.
it seems to be a bit of a pattern with him, unfortunately, because he's a great player
Yeah.
and a highly respected and popular guy, and fantastic with his communication. He calls it the defense expertly. But yeah, so I hope this isn't an ongoing thing with Lucanio and that we might see him starting to sort of fade out the picture. I
Hmm.
really hope not.
Because
He's
of that. Yeah.
still got a lot to offer. So hopefully this is the last of his injuries and he can now, sort of settle down for a while and just play because
And
it
just
seems
play.
he comes back for 2 games and then he's out for
And then
a
it's
couple
something
of
else.
months. Yeah. So yeah, I'd like to see Henko coming through. And on the wings, Edward van der Merwe, I'd like to see him get some opportunities. Um, yeah, otherwise I think the box are pretty healthy in almost every position.
Yeah. 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 I actually forgot to add. Yeah. We definitely think South Africa needs to see Edward van der Merwe more in the box jersey. Although we've got three excellent wings
Yeah.
in their prime, and then we can't
Yeah.
discard my just yet. He, like
Yeah.
Rassie said, he clocked one of the top speeds
Yeah.
at recent testing. So it's an
Yeah.
abundance of wings, but certainly there can be scope for new guys to step in.
No, absolutely. And the thing is, like, the Cheslins and Kirtleys, fantastic players, our first choice easily, but those
Hmm.
guys can go down fairly easily. And like I say, they tend to happen in sort of like groups of injuries, if that's the right word I'm
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
think. I mean, Cheslin rolls his ankle and Kirtley pulls a hammy, and then suddenly you've got to have, a guy who can step in, who is as good, and
Yeah,
a guy like Ed, comes to mind.
yeah. And then I hope after that scathing column you wrote that your Irish lineage is still intact there. But yes, like what a epic duel between France and Ireland this past
Yeah,
weekend. And we coming down to the last weekend in the Six Nations, but also some controversy in a couple of games. We let's first chat about the Irish and France one.
yeah,
Anton Dupont coming off with that nasty knock
yeah,
to his knee. So what have you made about that? And then also Ireland dropping down in the rankings after being the world's best team
yeah.
between World Cups for years.
Yeah. I think an important thing about that game was just how France got their strategy absolutely perfect. Fabien Galthy is unashamedly a disciple, almost,
Of Rassie.
if you'll pardon the expression, of Rassie Erasmus. He said as much. He says he thinks Rassie's a genius, and
Mm,
7-1 bomb squad. Mind you, Ireland had 6-2, so they weren't far behind.
exactly.
But Galtey, I think, really got his planning correct, and that he saw that game as a game of two parts, or two halves, as the cliche goes.
Well, yes.
Um, and that he had a plan for the first half when he knew that, I mean, Ireland always start extremely
Weather
strongly,
the storm. Yes.
especially at Dublin and in Dublin, and he knew that they would be on the defense for at least the first 20 to 30 minutes.
Mm,
And so he had a plan for that. He had guys who he knew would defend solidly, and I think they made 29 tackles in a row in the first like 15 minutes or so. Their defense was fantastic.
massive. Yeah.
But they knew that they had to withstand an early Irish onslaught, and then the plan was to hold the fort, and then in the second half they brought on a monster second pack,
Yeah.
and they knew that they could outplay the Irish substitutes. So they had, I mean, they were similar bomb squads, 6-2-7-1, but the quality of the French
The replacement.
guys
Yes.
coming on was
Yeah.
superior to
That's the
that.
thing.
And then I mean, they scored, I think it was 30 odd points, 34 unanswered.
Yeah.
As they just and that was spectacular to watch. I mean,
Yeah.
Ireland are an extremely good rugby team, very structured. They've been very successful, and they were just put to the sword. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think France played extremely well. They had a plan, and look, Ireland got those late tries to give their score a little bit of respectability,
Something
but
of a bit of
really
respect. Yeah.
they were hammered. And yeah, I think, yeah, I'm half Irish, but I've picked up on something Brian O'Driscoll wrote just over a week ago, actually not too long before this big game, and he said that he's worried that there's this arrogance in Irish rugby,
Mhm.
where it's gone beyond self-confidence and
Yeah.
belief.
Yes.
It's now expectation of victory, and he said they're
Yeah.
becoming an unpopular team. And
Yeah.
I don't know how much is the fault of the actual players and how much is, the fans just getting carried away, but it still creates an overall perception. And I think it's true that Ireland have become arrogant. And I remember what Eben said after that, after Ireland beat them in that pool game
That
in
proof points.
2023.
Yeah.
He said he was quite taken aback by some of their chirps. Afterwards they said, "Oh well, don't worry. We'll see you in the final if you guys get
Yeah.
there." So they just took it for granted that they were going to be in the final, and I'm pretty sure they believed they were going to win it. But pride comes before a fall, eh?
Before a full hundred
But they
percent.
didn't learn their lesson there, because straight after that they won the Six Nations. So again, they would have just thought that, oh well, that what happened in the World Cup in the quarterfinal was an
We're
aberration. We're still
we're
extremely
still on
good.
top of the world.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, look, that game could be a watershed for them. they've got to eat some serious humble pie now, and
Mm.
I mean, that game was the farewell for three of their most experienced forwards.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be doing some serious introspection now, about rebuilding. Is it a watershed? Do we have to now bring in new blood? Do we have to not be so cocky?
Yeah, and tone down on the fist pumping after every small thing that they want,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and just lastly to touch on the Six Nations, you now hear Gregor Townsend, the Scottish coach, fighting to have the bomb squad abolished. He's been a staunch
Of course he is.
advocate against it.
Of course he is. Because he hasn't. He's a have-not.
Yeah, he doesn't have the players to actually pick a proper bomb squad. They've been trying the 6-2, all of them in the Six Nations, but they just can't seem to get it right. So yeah, we'll see lots of teams still fighting against the bomb squad, but I can say with certainty they can chill. The
Yeah.
bomb squad
And
and the nuke squad's here to stay.
the critics and the non-critics, if you like, fall into two very distinct categories. The countries that have great forward depth aren't saying a
Yeah.
word and
Yeah.
are picking 7-1-6-2 splits, and those who haven't are screaming blue
Was
murder about
fighting.
how
Yeah.
unfair it is. It was quite funny to see what Eddie Jones had to say.
Yeah.
Good old Eddie. Always has a choice chirp or two,
Yeah.
and he said criticism of of bomb squads is plain daft. Was his words. He said it's madness. He said I quite like this chirp. He said coaches select teams to win games, not they don't select teams because they're sensitive to the opposition's feelings.
Yeah. That's a classic Eddie Jones joke. That's perfect. Mark, thanks for joining me this morning. It's been a lekker chat. We'll hopefully be back to a full complement next week. It's been another episode of the Last Word on Rugby. We chatted all things the box and how that alignment camp went. Now we're bracing for the last bit of the URC starting in next weekend. If you haven't yet, please click on that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll bring you all the latest South African and Springbok rugby news every week here on the Last Word on Rugby. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.